Hello, my name is Steve Mankowski. I'm the blacksmith here for Preservation, Virginia, here at Jamestown Rediscovery. I'm working here with the archaeologists for quite some time, mostly doing experimental archaeology. So a lot of our work and my co-worker Shell Browders is to study artifacts our archaeologists here on the island have found over the past 25, 30 years or so. And we study those objects and really trying to figure out how the object was made. You know, first of all, what kind of metal are we looking at? We're looking at steel, iron, and what is the object? What was its purpose? And then reconstruct it, but using 16th, 17th century technology, to do that. That's the challenging part. There's not a lot of written record as far as how these things we're looking at were made. And today's video is a padlock. Decided to, not too long ago, to secure the church in a period manner. So I looked around in our collection and said, what do we have as far as locks? And found a padlock or padlock fragments that I thought would be a good candidate, and decided to reconstruct a working padlock that we can use on the church, but based on one that we had found here on Jamestown Island. Hello, here we are at the Memorial Church, and I'm standing in front of the doors that were just about 2 years ago placed on the west end of the church here. You can see some of the reproduction hardware that we worked on the past year or two. Locks go back pretty early in history, at least 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Some of the earliest locks were made of wood, found in Assyria, which ancient Assyria, Egypt. You'll see wooden locks that are very similar in how they work as the modern pin tumbler lock. Iron locks we're starting to see by the Greek and Roman period. You're starting to see, of course, Iron Age. You're starting to see iron locks by Roman Greek period, which are similar to some of the locks we're seeing at Jamestown, at least in how they function. Here at Jamestown, we can see the phases of locks used in the first few years, by 1607, probably 1610. The types of locks we see amongst the artifacts here tend to be locks that we find on chests, trunks. Padlocks seem to be more common than house locks. So the men here, the first years, are living out of their, basically we could say, their suitcases, their trunks, their chests. So their early locks tend to represent that. As we see them going here for the long run, there are more permanence and structures. We're seeing house door locks. We're seeing fragments of door locks that would be for a door on a house. Looking through some types of locks or padlocks for churches in England, and I came across out of a book written by a man named William Twopenny in the 1830s. He sketched many iron pieces throughout England at that time. And one here is a padlock that is on a church in York, England, medieval church. So I was interested in this particular type of padlock. So I contacted Don Wormke, and we looked through in the dry room, and sure enough, we started to find pieces or fragments of this type of padlock.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Don Wormke, and I'm going to take you on a short tour inside what we call the dry room. Because of the nature of iron, we have to have it maintained in an environment that is basically low humidity, moderate temperature, in order to keep the iron from essentially falling apart or corroding. Let's proceed. The first drawer here is essentially the guts of locks. These are mostly lock springs of those locks. The next drawer here is what we call the lock plate. The next drawer here is a drawer of what we call escutcheons, or essentially they're embellishment of the lock plate to make it a little bit more fancy, where the individual again would put the key into the lock. And this last drawer here is the variation in the locks. People are more or less familiar with this. You have different types of locks: ball locks, triangle locks, and then these are the lock hasps associated with those locks.
One of the things I do as a blacksmith in replicating an item, I'll study the artifact, and I like to draw the artifact, the fragment in this case, because it allows me to feel it, to draw it. You know, I'm using my brain and my hands much as I would with the hammer, you know, on the anvil with a piece of iron. So it's the first stages of my brain kind of, you know, studying that piece, measuring it, drawing it carefully. So the approach in building this lock, traditionally a locksmith would start with a key, you know, build a key, and I forged the key out. The key is forged from iron and then filed to create the detail, often in the bow, the shank, and the bit of the key. And I'll build a lock around that key's proportions, you know, the design. All the parts of this lock, the shackle or bail, the inner workings of the lock, the spring, are forged to shape. They're hammered, in other words, on an anvil while that iron's hot, and then those pieces are then fit to work with that key, around that key. The relatively simple mechanisms, you know, within that lock, the inner workings of that padlock are not unlike a thumb latch, a lift bar, and a keeper that you'd see in the 16th century and on up into the 19th century. Show you how this works. You've got the key into the keyhole, and by the way, this key has a hollow shank, basically a tube, partly, and there's a pin riveted inside the lock that shank, the hollow shank, will have to go through, which makes it a little harder. So a solid shanked key would not work this lock. Even though it might have the same size bit, it would not work because it'd have to be hollow to fit over. So that's the first step, and I'm going to push. I can visualize what's happening. I can push. I'm lifting up the bar, and I'm taking now the shackle off, disengaging the shackle. We saw in the dry room, we saw this particular piece. I call it, you know, the bail or shackle. Inside here we can see the bolt I was talking about that lifts up. I don't know if you can see that in there. Now when I go to close that shackle, push it down into the lock, the spring that's in there, that putting tension on that bolt constantly, when that pushes when that keeper came down in there, it pushed the bolt up with that tension, you know, spring tension bolt, and then snapped in place once that, you know, went all the way in. Pretty simple, but effective to a degree. Many thanks for watching this Dig Deeper video about the reproduction of a lock for the Historic Jamestowne Church. Please come visit us out at Jamestown Island, where we'll be demonstrating blacksmithing, cooperage, and other living history programs. Please visit our website for a schedule of our events.